The official story says the Ark of the Covenant disappeared more than 2,000 years ago. Historians believe it was lost after the destruction of the first temple in Jerusalem. Some say it was taken to Ethiopia. Others believe it lies buried beneath the Temple Mount. But what if everything we've been told is a distraction? In 1991, during the final collapse of the Soviet Union, a classified operation took place beneath the Kremlin. Known only to a few high-ranking KGB officers, the mission was simply named Zavet, Russian for Covenant. Documents recently leaked from Russian state archives mention a sacred artifact sealed beneath the Tsar's vault, protected by ancient scripts no one could decipher. None of this made headlines. It was buried under more pressing news: the fall of communism, the opening of borders, and the rise of oligarchs. But among historians of forbidden archaeology and secret theology, the whispers never stopped. Why would Soviet officials in the 80s and 90s care about a biblical relic? Unless they believed they had already found it. And if they did, what power were they seeking to unlock? In this episode, we dive deep into the dark labyrinths beneath Moscow. We explore recently declassified maps, eyewitness testimonies, and the mysterious deaths of scholars who got too close. Is it possible that the Ark was never lost, just hidden in the last place anyone would expect? Because if the Ark is under the Kremlin, that would change everything, geopolitically, spiritually, and historically. It started with a man named Dr. Anton Lebedev, a linguist, historian, and cryptographer, once employed by the KGB. In 1990, months before the Soviet collapse, Lebedev disappeared under strange circumstances. He was last seen entering the Grand Kremlin Palace for a late-night consultation. According to internal reports, he was summoned to decode a set of inscriptions found on a sealed sarcophagus uncovered during renovations of the Senate basement. The official reason? An imperial relic from the Romanov era. But Lebedev's personal journal, later smuggled to the West, tells a much stranger story. He described a blackened gold-plated box unlike anything in Russian history, surrounded by carvings in an ancient Semitic dialect he believed to be pre-Hebraic, possibly Proto-Canaanite. His final written line, scrawled in shaky ink, "It hums when no one is near." After that, silence. His disappearance was officially ruled a defection, but his wife Natalia never believed it. She insisted her husband was silenced after he realized the box wasn't Russian or even European. In an interview years later, she said Anton had shown her a sketch of the artifact. It matched the biblical description of the Ark almost perfectly. The cherubim, the gold lid, the carrying poles, all of it. Why was it under the Kremlin? How did it get there? The Soviet Union never explained. But shortly after Lebedev's disappearance, the entire corridor where the relic was found was sealed off. Military guards were posted. The basement was under restoration for over a decade. And then came the earthquakes, small tremors in the heart of Moscow, too shallow to be natural, too rhythmic to be accidental. Was something awakening beneath the Kremlin? In 2006, a former FSB agent named Mikhail Reshetnikov anonymously leaked a series of photographs to an underground forum dedicated to Soviet-era secrets. The images showed what appeared to be deep tunnels beneath the Kremlin, not the well-documented metro bunkers or Cold War fallout shelters, but something older, much older. The walls were lined with sandstone instead of concrete, etched with symbols far older than Cyrillic. In one of the photos, at the far edge of the frame, something metallic glinted under torchlight. Some claimed it was a modern tool. Others said it was a gilded horn or a handle. The photos were dismissed as fabrications, but users noticed an odd detail. One of the tunnel entrances bore the Hebrew letter Aleph carved backward. It was this letter that led a small group of researchers, theologians, cryptographers, and a defrocked Jesuit priest to investigate further. One of them was Father Matteo Riccardi, a former Vatican scholar turned exile. He had spent decades tracking relics mentioned in apocryphal scriptures, relics believed to bend time, heal the sick, and even destroy armies. When he saw the photos, he reportedly said only 4 words: "The Ark still speaks." Within 6 months, Riccardi was dead. Official cause, cardiac arrest, but conspiracy theorists claim his apartment in Turin had been ransacked, maps stolen, notebooks burned, and a single phrase etched into his bedroom mirror in Russian: "Ty videl slishkom mnogo." You have seen too much. What were they all chasing? A myth? Or something real? And if the Ark really is hidden under the Kremlin, the next question is even more dangerous. Who is protecting it? And why? In 2010, a private expedition led by a Czech-Russian researcher named Eva Dvořáková claimed to have located an uncharted entrance into one of the Kremlin's older catacombs, hidden beneath the former headquarters of the Soviet Ministry of Culture. The ministry, long suspected of storing confiscated religious artifacts, had mysteriously shuttered that facility in the early 1990s without explanation. Dvořáková's team used thermal imaging and old architectural blueprints smuggled from the Tsarist era to identify a narrow shaft sealed behind a false wall. What they found inside would fuel years of speculation. The tunnel was lined with black stone, unlike any found in Moscow's geology. It descended in a perfect spiral, narrowing as it went deeper, and at the bottom there was a door, not metal, not wood, but something ancient, cold, and humming faintly, even though no electronics were present. It bore no keyhole, only a symbol, a pair of wings flanking a circle of flame. Eva documented everything, but when her team returned the next morning to continue, the shaft had been filled with concrete. Military trucks had been seen leaving the area hours earlier. The footage she had uploaded to a secure server vanished. Her public interviews were discredited, her funding withdrawn, and within a year, her academic license was revoked due to erratic behavior. She now lives in seclusion in the Bohemian woods, refusing all media requests except one. In a leaked voice memo to a journalist, Eva whispered, "It wasn't buried, it was placed there, with purpose. And they are waiting for something." Waiting for what? The question echoes louder each year. Because the stories aren't stopping, and neither are the signs. In 2015, seismic anomalies began appearing beneath central Moscow, shallow, pulsing waves detected not just by geological sensors, but by tourists. Visitors in Red Square reported hearing a low vibration at specific intervals, always around midnight. Several claimed their electronic devices malfunctioned or recorded strange magnetic interference. At first, authorities blamed faulty infrastructure. But internal memos leaked by a former engineer from the Moscow metro told another story. The memos detailed irregular magnetic pulses emanating from Sector 6B, an unmarked location on blueprints located beneath the Kremlin arsenal. The pulses were described as harmonic, too precise to be natural. Scientists brought in under contract by Roscosmos were told the signals were likely deep Earth acoustic phenomena. But in the margins of one report, a handwritten note read, "Pattern matches early Hebrew chants, check Book of Kings." It wasn't just the vibrations. Around this time, 4 Kremlin guards were hospitalized after suffering identical symptoms: blurred vision, auditory hallucinations, and episodes of uncontrollable weeping. One, identified only as Ivan D., told his nurse, "I saw a golden box. It was crying." The report was buried. The guards were dismissed on psychiatric grounds. And the room where the episodes occurred was sealed permanently. But not before one curious intern, Daria Kuznetsova, snapped a photo of the interior. A small chamber with scorched walls and a single metallic impression on the floor. Two long rectangular grooves, parallel and evenly spaced, carrying poles. The ark, according to scripture, had to be transported without being touched. The grooves in the floor matched those dimensions exactly. Could it be that the ark isn't merely resting beneath the Kremlin, but resonating? And if so, who or what is listening? The Vatican, long suspected of knowing more than it reveals, has remained publicly silent on the matter. But diplomatic cables released through a whistleblower suggest that something changed after 2016. One encrypted message sent from the Apostolic Nunciature in Moscow to the Secretary of State in Rome read, "Convergence confirmed. Notify the custodians." Another cable referenced artifacts echoing across time and included coordinates that pointed directly to Cathedral Square at the heart of the Kremlin complex. Soon after, an unusual delegation arrived in Moscow, a quiet group of Jesuits accompanied by Swiss nationals with no official ties to the Holy See. They stayed only 72 hours. Their movements were unrecorded by press, their hotel bookings made under aliases, and no one from the Russian government acknowledged their visit. But hotel staff recall strange details: requests for blackout curtains, complete silence during meals, and one peculiar item left behind in a wastebasket: a torn piece of parchment with the phrase "Dominus adveniet per arcam" scribbled across it. The Lord shall come through the ark. Around the same time, surveillance drones captured an unusual delivery to the Kremlin. A sealed crate, over 2 meters long and marked only with the letter Z, was brought in under armed escort. The crate never appeared in customs logs, but a week later, a well-known Russian Orthodox bishop gave a sermon in which he mentioned the holy vessel of judgment returning to the stronghold of the bear. No explanation was given, no further comment was allowed, but rumors began to swell, not only of a relic beneath the Kremlin, but of a prophecy tied to its unveiling, something ancient, buried for centuries, that must never be touched by unworthy hands. What is the Kremlin guarding? A political secret or a divine weapon? As speculation deepened, independent journalist and researcher Olivia Hartwell released a controversial exposé titled "The Ark in Red." The book, dismissed by mainstream media as speculative fiction, laid out a chilling hypothesis that the Ark of the Covenant had been secretly moved from Jerusalem during the Crusades, not to Ethiopia or Rome, but to Constantinople, and later smuggled into Russia by Eastern Orthodox mystics fleeing the Ottoman conquest. According to Hartwell's research, a clandestine brotherhood known as Strazhchi Svetla, the Guardians of the Light, was tasked with protecting the Ark through generations. They believed the Ark held more than sacred stone tablets. They believed it was a vessel of divine frequency, a device capable of connecting the mind of humankind to something ancient, intelligent, and alien. In one chapter, Hartwell describes a page from a 13th century Czech manuscript that allegedly references the golden eye that sees without light, buried beneath the palace of the northern kings. She claims that palace refers not to a European castle, but to the Kremlin, specifically the chambers now off-limits even to most Russian officials. Her theory goes further, that during the Soviet era, Stalin himself was obsessed with esoteric power. Records from the NKVD show dozens of secret archaeological missions, including one that returned from the Caucasus with a metallic vessel described only in code. It was stored in Vault 9, a facility rumored to be located beneath Lenin's mausoleum. Was the Ark among those artifacts? And if so, why was it hidden? Was it too powerful to control or too dangerous to reveal? Hartwell vanished 6 months after the book's release. Her last known location, a train to Moscow. Her final blog post ended with the words, "I think I'm getting close." By 2018, whispers of the Ark beneath the Kremlin had reached Western intelligence circles. A leaked MI6 memo referred cryptically to a theological anomaly beneath Moscow and warned that non-state actors may attempt to retrieve or activate the object. Around the same time, an anonymous former CIA analyst, codenamed Greyfall, published a redacted map on the dark web. The overlay showed known Kremlin subterranean levels, but one section was blacked out with the word cherub stamped over it. This wasn't typical government jargon. Cherubim in biblical texts are the angelic guardians placed over the ark. The implication was chilling. Someone in the intelligence community believed the ark was real, located and under divine or artificial protection. Adding to the mystery, in November of that year, a blackout struck central Moscow. The official cause was blamed on a transformer fire. But video footage captured a strange pulse of light over the Kremlin, followed by a deep, low-frequency sound that echoed for nearly a full minute. Witnesses described an overwhelming sense of dizziness, nausea, and emotional distress. Some burst into tears without knowing why. A few described hearing a phrase, not spoken aloud, but seemingly embedded in their minds. "Return what was taken." The Kremlin never addressed the event publicly. But shortly afterward, all international research collaborations involving Russian theologians were abruptly cancelled. Foreign academics were denied visas. Domestic scholars began disappearing or recanting their prior findings. The most chilling case was that of Professor Leonid Voskresensky, who in a televised interview had stated, "The ark does not contain the word of God, it contains the sound of God." He died less than a week later in a mysterious car accident. Was that just coincidence? Or were the frequencies awakening something humanity is not prepared to face? In early 2019, satellite imagery revealed a peculiar pattern emerging in the plaza directly above the Kremlin substructures. Heat signatures taken during the winter months showed symmetrical hotspots forming a six-pointed star, perfectly aligned with magnetic north. While Russian authorities claimed geothermal vents were responsible, independent physicists argued the shapes were too precise and too consistent to occur naturally. This anomaly coincided with a secretive restoration of the Ivan the Great Bell Tower. Officially, the work was structural, but a drone operator captured a brief clip of workers in hazmat suits entering the tower with long lead-lined cases. No one could confirm what was inside. Yet a former Kremlin archivist, under the pseudonym Boris K., claimed the bell tower was once used by the Tsars not only as a watchtower, but as a resonance chamber. He described an underground vault directly beneath the tower's base, where sound is not heard but felt. According to Boris, the chamber was sealed in 1917 after priests reported hearing voices speaking in a language no one understood. Some believed it to be angelic. Others said it was the language of the Nephilim. What if the Ark isn't just an object, but a transmitter? If so, the implications are terrifying. A relic capable of emitting low-frequency energy fields that can influence emotion, behavior, even belief, all housed beneath the political heart of a nuclear superpower. And then came the event. In May 2020, a group of American tourists was detained after flying a drone too close to the Kremlin. Their footage was confiscated, but not before one frame leaked online. It showed a brief image, distorted and low resolution, of a glowing object beneath a glass floor. Twin shapes resembling wings, faintly pulsing with golden light. The post was removed within minutes. But the question had already taken root in minds around the world. If the Ark is under the Kremlin, what is it waiting for? That same year, whispers emerged of a secret summit, not between nations but between religions. It allegedly took place in a secluded monastery outside Kazan. Representatives from the Russian Orthodox Church, a Sufi scholar from Dagestan, a Buddhist monk flown in from Buryatia, and a Jesuit envoy operating under a false diplomatic title were said to have met for 3 nights in total secrecy. No public records exist of this gathering, but one thing was clear: something had brought these spiritual leaders together, something that transcended doctrine and demanded immediate consensus. A monk who attended the gathering anonymously claimed they were shown an object, not the Ark itself, but a relic taken from it. He described a tablet of impossibly smooth stone, engraved with characters that shimmered when viewed from different angles. None of the languages could be matched to any ancient script, and yet each of the religious representatives claimed to understand its meaning. When asked what the message was, the monk simply replied, "It said, prepare." Shortly after this alleged summit, President Vladimir Putin gave an uncharacteristically cryptic speech to the Duma, stating, "Russia must be the keeper of something greater than politics or power, something eternal, entrusted to us for a time not yet known." The phrase was brushed off as poetic nationalism, but insiders noted that the phrase matched a line from a forbidden Orthodox hymn, one traditionally reserved for the return of divine instruments. Then came the silence. All discussion of the Ark, even in conspiracy circles, was suddenly shadowed by takedowns, server seizures, and disinformation campaigns. Some claimed the Kremlin had weaponized a division of its cyber warfare program to scrub all digital trails related to the Ark's possible presence. Others whispered of something darker, that the Ark itself was influencing perception, erasing its own trail from collective memory. Is the Kremlin merely hiding the Ark, or is the Ark hiding itself? In 2021, a peculiar pattern began to surface among Moscow's underground workers. Maintenance crews, utility engineers, and even members of archaeological teams tasked with restoring old Tsarist foundations began to report strange experiences. Several described inexplicable loss of time, full hours unaccounted for, while working in certain lower sectors beneath the Kremlin. Others mentioned hearing a choral hum that seemed to come from inside their own heads, not through their ears. One engineer, Viktor Sokolov, wrote in his personal log before being reassigned, "I descended to level -6. There was no light, but I could see. Not with eyes, with memory." His entry ended with a chilling phrase, "It is not a box, it is a door." Sokolov vanished a week later. Then came the event that truly rattled insiders. A top Kremlin official, whose name remains redacted in all released documents, collapsed during a closed intelligence briefing. Medical teams found nothing physically wrong, yet he remained unresponsive for nearly 6 hours. Upon waking, he allegedly recited verses from the book of Ezekiel in fluent Aramaic. The man had no prior religious training and spoke only Russian and French. The incident prompted a sweeping psychological evaluation of all Kremlin staff with subterranean access. At least 13 individuals were reassigned or placed under psychiatric care, all of whom showed signs of shared hallucinations, vivid, apocalyptic dreams, or, more disturbingly, sudden bursts of unknown language, always tied to ancient Semitic roots. What is causing these symptoms? A leak of ancient radiation, a psychological contagion, or is it something far more unearthly? A consciousness reaching out through time, embedded in the Ark, now stirring again beneath layers of stone and secrecy. Whatever it is, it seems no longer content to stay silent. By late 2022, the phenomenon began to attract attention far beyond Russia's borders. A joint academic paper from 2 respected institutions, one in Israel, the other in Germany, was quietly circulated among theological scholars and cryptographers. Though never formally published, the paper was leaked to an encrypted research forum, where it quickly became the focus of intense debate. Titled Resonance of the Covenant, Harmonics in Ancient Relics, the paper outlined how certain religious artifacts, when subjected to extremely low-frequency sound waves, exhibited measurable electromagnetic activity. Most notably, the researchers proposed that the Ark, if it still existed, could function as a type of divine capacitor, storing not electricity, but something else entirely: memory. Not human memory, but ancestral memory, collective memory. They backed their theory with fragments of ancient texts, including the Book of Jubilees and several passages from the Dead Sea Scrolls that describe a vessel of remembrance that must never be awakened before its time. One passage read, "For if it be opened before the veil is torn by the heavens, great weeping shall fall upon the earth." This would all be dismissed as esoteric speculation, if not for the timing. Just weeks later, seismic monitors recorded what some experts described as a song beneath Moscow, a rhythmic pulse with clear mathematical intervals, peaking at precisely 3:33 a.m. local time for 3 consecutive nights. Frequencies within the range of human emotion centers were detected, specifically those associated with awe, dread, and deep nostalgia. It was as if the ground beneath the Kremlin was remembering. Then the data stream stopped. Russia's Ministry of Emergency Situations announced a system malfunction, but no one has been able to reproduce the error. Not a single anomaly has been detected since. It's as if the Ark went quiet. But for what reason? In early 2023, a mysterious signal was intercepted by amateur radio operators in Finland, Iceland, and the Caucasus Mountains. The frequency was unusual, outside standard radio bands, pulsing at intervals of 7 seconds. The transmission lasted just under 4 minutes, repeating the same encrypted tone sequence. At first, it was dismissed as interference from military equipment. But when a linguistics AI lab in Zurich ran the tones through phonetic mapping software, the results were unsettling. The pulses corresponded to consonantal roots found in ancient Ugaritic, a language predating Biblical Hebrew by over 1,000 years. A fragment was extracted. "The throne returns to silence, but the throne remembers." Within days, several of the radio operators who had originally picked up the signal reported their hard drives had been remotely wiped. The lab's servers in Zurich suffered a sudden, unexplained outage, and an anonymous warning was posted on the forum where the data had first been shared. "It is not for the ears of men." Meanwhile, in Moscow, there was a subtle but chilling development. Renovations to the Dormition Cathedral, the oldest and most sacred church in the Kremlin, were abruptly halted. A source from the Russian Patriarchate claimed workers uncovered an unmarked relic sealed in obsidian, deeply buried beneath the altar. The relic was removed within hours, and all workers were required to sign lifetime NDAs. But one audio technician who was present during the removal managed to record what he described as a harmonic feedback that nearly caused him to lose consciousness. He said it sounded like thousands of voices, praying and screaming at once. And then silence. Total, crushing silence. He deleted the file the next morning. What could produce that sound? An ancient object, or a living memory that never died? As the year progressed, sightings and phenomena around the Kremlin grew stranger. Birds refused to nest near its towers. Dogs, usually indifferent to historical monuments, began to bark uncontrollably near the cathedral square at night. Tour guides started omitting certain passages of historical tours without explanation, while security around the Arsenal block tightened with no visible construction or diplomatic activity. Then came the case of Alexander Volodin, a linguistics prodigy and cryptology consultant for the Russian Ministry of Culture. In a leaked voicemail to a friend, Alexander claimed he had been asked to translate an unknown script on a golden artifact not listed in any official archive. He described the script as fluid, alive, shifting between letters and images, something that whispers back while you read it. 3 days later, Alexander was found wandering a forest 50 kilometers outside Moscow, disoriented and speaking a language no one could identify. He had no memory of how he got there. When pressed, he repeated one phrase over and over in a trance-like state. "The box remembers, and now so do I." Doctors diagnosed him with acute dissociative amnesia. But members of an underground esoteric network believe Alexander had come into direct contact with the Ark. They claim the object is no longer dormant, that it has begun to awaken specific minds with historical resonance, like keys tuning a forgotten instrument. If that's true, it changes everything. What if the Ark doesn't need to be opened? What if it chooses when to open and to whom? And what if that time has arrived? Because deep beneath the layers of politics, stone and secrecy, something ancient is stirring. Not an object, not a relic, a presence. In October 2023, a rare convergence occurred. A blood moon aligned directly over the Kremlin, casting an eerie red hue across its domes and towers. For most, it was just an astronomical curiosity. But for a small circle of mystics, historians and occult researchers, it was the signal they had been waiting for. Ancient Sumerian and Hebrew texts alike spoke of the red shadow as the veil through which divine judgment peers, the night when sealed things remember their purpose. That night something happened. Security footage from a nearby government building, briefly posted online before deletion, showed a blinding flash beneath the Cathedral of the Archangel at exactly 3:33 a.m. The flash was followed by a brief 7-second citywide blackout. Backup generators failed, clocks reset, and encrypted surveillance feeds were corrupted beyond recovery. When systems returned, a timestamp anomaly was found in every camera system within 500 meters. 7 minutes were missing. Then silence, no official statement, no news reports. But insiders whisper of a new vault being constructed below the Kremlin, 100 meters deeper than any known foundation. Rumors suggest it's not for protection but containment, because something didn't just activate, it spoke. A low-frequency pulse was detected by independent seismic labs as far away as Turkey and northern China. It carried no message in the traditional sense. But researchers noted one chilling pattern. When converted to audio and slowed down, the wave resembled a human breath. Not mechanical, not digital, organic, and it was exhaling. Is the Ark of the Covenant not just a vessel, but a living witness? Is it not merely a record of divine law, but a remnant of divine presence? A presence that waited in silence for centuries and has now remembered its name. Following the incident, the Vatican broke its silence in the most cryptic of ways. During a public mass in St. Peter's Basilica, Pope Clement XV recited a passage never before heard in any liturgical ceremony. It was delivered in ancient Syriac, and loosely translated it stated, "And the keeper shall knock thrice upon stone, and the silence shall answer not with echo, but with fire." The line wasn't found in any known gospel. Experts speculated it came from one of the forbidden texts stored in the secret archives. Perhaps the Liber Arcanum, a manuscript rumored to contain records of pre-Abrahamic contact between mankind and divine intelligences. The timing couldn't be dismissed. Within hours, several known religious scholars and artifact historians across Europe went dark, their blogs erased, emails deactivated, university profiles suspended. Some are still missing. One of them was Dr. Emilia Thorne, a British theologian and Ark researcher who had published several controversial theses linking the Ark to a kind of acoustic intelligence. And Dizzy, in her last podcast, recorded 1 week before her disappearance. She spoke nervously of a convergence between artifact and architecture, not to hold the object, but to amplify it. She referenced Kremlin blueprints, which showed oddly placed metallic channels leading nowhere, unless you mapped them as acoustic vectors. Then they all pointed to a single subterranean chamber directly beneath the Tsar cannon. A place long believed symbolic, now possibly functional. Dr. Thorne ended her podcast with a whisper. They didn't build the Kremlin over it by accident. They built it to speak with it. And now the world is beginning to realize something is listening. Not only that, it's remembering, it's waiting. But for what? And worse, for whom? By January 2024, something shifted in the Kremlin's public stance, subtle but undeniable. President Putin, known for his rigid secular tone, began invoking language strangely spiritual in nature. In a televised speech marking the Orthodox New Year, he declared, "Russia does not guard borders alone. We guard the threshold between silence and memory." No further clarification was given. Then, without warning, all academic access to Russian historical sites was suspended indefinitely. The State Historical Museum was closed for renovation, the Kremlin Armory restricted to only guided tours, and any mention of the Ark, even in online forums, was aggressively scrubbed from Russian web domains. Yet interest only grew. Deep within the online underground, encrypted message boards lit up with a flurry of strange leaks. Scans of sketches showing twin cherubim, early Soviet memos referencing Project Zaraz, and what appeared to be an incomplete diagram of a resonance chamber labeled Initiation Chamber Thea. Each detail pointed to one conclusion: the Ark wasn't merely stored, it was being prepared. Prepared for what? That answer might lie in a document known only as the Final Protocol, mentioned briefly in the now declassified diary of Soviet occultist General Vlasov. He wrote, "When the Ark awakens fully, it will not show us God, it will show us the mirror." A mirror of what? Of who we truly are, or of what we were never meant to become? As paranoia spread, global intelligence agencies quietly ramped up their own investigations. Satellites were repositioned. Radio frequencies were jammed. And within the Vatican, an emergency conclave was rumored to have ended with one haunting decree. The covenant must not be broken again, but perhaps it already has. And the Ark, resting beneath the Kremlin for centuries, is no longer asleep. By mid-2024, a final chilling revelation emerged. Not from Moscow, not from Washington, but from an archaeological dig in northern Turkey. A team excavating the ruins of Hattusa uncovered a fragmented clay tablet, dated to the Hittite Empire, bearing a symbol identical to that found beneath the Kremlin. 2 wings surrounding a flaming circle. The cuneiform inscription was partially intact, but one line stood out in sharp relief. "The vessel that contains memory of the sky shall sleep under the throne of the Iron Bear." Historians were baffled. There were no known connections between the ancient Hittites and medieval Russia. But esoteric scholars immediately understood the reference. Iron Bear was a long-standing allegory for the Russian Empire in obscure Kabbalistic and Eastern European mysticism. The implications were staggering. The Ark may have been moved intentionally, thousands of years ago, in accordance with a prophecy older than Scripture. In Moscow, preparations intensified. Satellite imagery captured rapid excavation near the Ivan the Great Bell Tower under the guise of maintenance. Night after night, trucks entered the complex, carrying sealed cargo marked only with radiation hazard symbols, and one cryptic word in Cyrillic, echo. And then it stopped. All traffic ceased. The tower was closed indefinitely. Surveillance satellites went dark over the area. It was as if a veil had descended over the very heart of the Kremlin. But in Tel Aviv, a Mossad contact leaked a final piece of intelligence. An intercepted Russian transmission sent in code, translated to a single sentence, "The breath has returned to the throne." The Ark, if that's what it truly is, may no longer be a relic. It may be awake, and if it is, what happens next is not in human hands. Weeks later, a series of strange occurrences began to ripple outward from Moscow. In Warsaw, Prague, and Bucharest, several underground tremors were detected, yet no seismic fault lines exist beneath those cities. Independent researchers from ETH Zurich published a redacted report noting a pattern in these tremors. They followed the shape of a spiral, expanding outward from the Kremlin, like a signal dispersing through layers of rock and memory. Meanwhile, a renowned physicist in Kyoto, Dr. Natsuki Takahara, noticed something equally strange. Global magnetic field sensors were registering slight distortions, not in strength but in direction. The North Pole had begun drifting erratically within a confined radius. Her team's hypothesis was radical. Something beneath Moscow was generating a localized gravitational anomaly. Something ancient, something precise. And then came the global dreams. A surge of reports on dream forums, mental health databases, and even police logs described similar visions. A golden box in a dark chamber, voices speaking in languages long forgotten, and a figure, neither man nor beast, standing in judgment. These dreams crossed continents and cultures. Children who had never read a Bible described the same images. Clerics began preaching from texts they had never seen. What was causing this? Was it mass hysteria? Or was the Ark not just awake, but calling across bloodlines, belief systems, and time itself? Inside the Kremlin, protocols changed. Guards were no longer rotated through certain lower levels. Instead, a new unit was deployed, Division Cherub, a Black Ops branch reporting directly to the Presidential Security Service. Their emblem, a winged flame, identical to that carved on the chamber found by Eva Dvořáková over a decade earlier. Only once did one of these agents speak. His name was Anatoly Gurev, and he defected to Finland before being arrested for espionage. During his brief interrogation, he made a cryptic claim. "We are not guarding it. We are guarding you from it." He died in custody 3 days later. Cause of death, massive cerebral hemorrhage, but no trauma or underlying condition was found. At the same time, the Kremlin's bell towers ceased ringing. Officially, it was due to repairs, but no public explanation could justify why the bells were removed entirely and replaced with large, soundproof titanium domes. Witnesses claimed that ever since, the silence over Red Square felt heavier, denser, as if the air itself were listening. Elsewhere, a network of historians and theologians began tracing a pattern. Every civilization that came near the Ark, from the Israelites to the Crusaders, from the Ottomans to the Soviets, eventually collapsed from within. Not by war, but by disintegration of identity, of cohesion, as if the Ark carried more than law or memory, as if it carried entropy itself. Then, finally, came the voice. Not in public, not in broadcast, but in the minds of those who had been closest to the mystery, researchers, scholars, even priests. Over a single week, 14 individuals independently reported hearing the same sentence in their sleep. "You were never meant to find me, but you have remembered." All 14 were institutionalized. They described the voice as beautiful and terrifying, like thunder wrapped in whisper. Some wept upon hearing it. Others collapsed. One researcher in Berlin drew a diagram of concentric circles with names inside them. Not human names, but symbols. She died by suicide hours later, leaving a final note. "The circles have opened. It is not mercy." At this point, global governments began treating the Kremlin Ark theory not as fiction, but as a strategic variable. NATO issued undisclosed warnings. A classified EU document categorized the object beneath the Kremlin as a non-nuclear existential asset. No one publicly admitted it, but behind closed doors, the Ark had become the most dangerous object on Earth. In the final leaked footage before all surveillance was blocked, a flickering image from a drone passing near the Kremlin showed a faint golden glow pulsing through the ground. It was rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat, slow, deliberate. The light spread and contracted, almost breathing, and then for exactly 9 seconds, everything in the frame froze. Not just the camera, the birds, the flags, the trees, as if time itself had held its breath. And when the drone's feed resumed, the pulse had stopped. But something had changed. That night, millions of people around the world reported waking at the same moment, 3:33 a.m. Each described the same sensation, as if someone had been watching them in their sleep. Not malevolent, not kind, just ancient. A presence neither fully divine nor fully human. Was this the Ark's final message? Not a weapon, not a prophecy, but a mirror, a reflection of what humanity has become, fractured, fearful, and reckless with power it does not understand. And now the mirror is facing us. So what lies beneath the Kremlin? Is it the true Ark of the Covenant, a relic beyond time? A machine, a divine memory, or something older than all myths, a consciousness encoded in gold and silence, buried not just in stone, but in the very shadow of power? We may never know for certain. Because perhaps it's not the object that's hidden, perhaps we are. Perhaps the Ark does not reveal itself until we are ready to remember what we truly are and what we have always feared to face. And if it is awake now, it is no longer asking for worship. It is demanding a reckoning that begins not in Jerusalem, but under the crimson stars of Moscow, where gold still hums beneath stone, and silence is never truly silent.